Today's episode is all about the biggest lessons I learned in art school. And this is from my overall experience. I have spent a lot of time learning how to be an artist. And I know a lot of artist friends and students of mine along the way haven't gone to art school. And I think there's a little bit of a mystery of what it is all about. And I want to share some of the biggest lessons I learned along the way. And of course, I just want to say this as a disclaimer. So many art schools are really different, and this is my personal experience. And before I tell you what the lessons are, I want you to know how long I spent learning how to be an artist because back in those days, again, this was literally like over 25 years ago, the only option was university. At least that was the prescribed, go to university if you want to learn something method. And so for me, my interest was there, but I did not have the confidence that this path was yet for me, and I didn't have confidence in myself as an artist at all to even call myself an artist. So I dabbled with art classes, obviously, all through high school, even though I never considered myself an artist. I also took all the art classes I could when I went to a community college. And this was my way of kind of putting my big toe in the water, so to speak. And I knew that it was something that I really loved. And I finally, after a few years of going round and round on where am I going with this education, I decided that I wanted to enroll into an art school. And I really looked at what was available to me in the city that I was living in because I wasn't interested in moving out of the city. And so I did my research on all the options that I could go to really get serious as an artist. And so for me, art school was this turning point where I feel like I really became serious about my art. So I think that as a turning point in my life, that moment, really was about getting serious and saying, "Yep, I'm an artist." Even though I still couldn't say I was an artist, I really became more serious about my art as a direction that I wanted to pursue. Was I terrified about what the outcome would be? Absolutely. I mean, I think any artist would tell you when you're going into any situation like that, like there's no proven path. There's no like, yep, guarantee this is going to work. So it was a huge gamble. I didn't have a lot of support behind me. I think my family thought I was completely nuts, but I was determined to go to the very best art school I could find in my city. And so I was really happy with the one that I chose. I was nervously applying to it, thinking, oh my gosh, they're never going to let me in. And I really came into it from the mindset of, I don't know how to be an artist. I don't know what these artists um, do to get these great ideas to be these great artists. And so I had this real scarcity mindset that artists were special people and that I was not one of them. I laugh now because after years and years and decades of really going down this path, I really understand that that was a mindset problem that I had and that I really felt like all these artists were special and that I was just going to sneak in and they wouldn't find out that I really wasn't an artist and that I could learn how to be an artist, even if I couldn't call myself an artist. How silly is that? So that was really my entry point into art school. And the reason why I wanted to pick the best one and why that was so important to me back then, and at that time, I'm looking back in my memory, and I think I was probably early 20s, 22, 23. So I went after a few years of floundering around. I did not go straight out of high school like many people. I failed a lot after high school, and I won't get into that on this episode, but I ended up kind of making a mid to early 20s decision of like, yep, this is the path I want to go down. Ready or not, here I come. So, with that in mind, I want to just back up really quick before I go through what I learned the most, but I really wanted to find an art school that could teach me how to come up with these ideas, and I really felt stumped by how people could do what they do for a living and do what they do as artists in general. And again, I felt this real lack. And so I had no idea where these ideas came from. I didn't know how to generate my own ideas. I was still really new in that, and all of the learning that I had been taught in high school was really pretty weak. I mean, I don't really have any strong memories of learning anything specifically except for stuff that felt like it just really wasn't like a serious way to be an artist. I don't know, that was just my perspective. Although I had a lot of opportunities how to, do a lot of different things, it didn't really feel like I knew enough how to be an artist. Okay, so that was my mindset, and I wanted to, like, really crack open me as an artist. And so I was like, "Yep, this is the art school for me." I applied, I was nervous, and I ended up getting in, even though I felt really weak as someone coming into an art school full of talented artists who are probably way more talented than me. So I just give you that little background of knowing where my mindset was when I came into art school and what that perspective was, because I think when you hear the lessons, you will understand why I have that perspective as well. So my art school, I really, even though I know a lot of people have different experiences, I really enjoyed it. I mean, of course, were there teachers that annoyed me here and there? Of course. Did I have to, literally like fight tooth and nail to get through 4 years of it financially and just mentally and emotionally? Absolutely. But let me share with you the first major lesson that stood out to me still to this day. I had this art teacher in the foundation years that's literally set us down and she said, quitting is an option and quitting on your art is an option. Quitting art school is an option. And I will tell you that most people give up. And she was literally saying, are you going to be one of those that gives up on your art? Are you going to be the one that quits art school? And I think she said that to really instill that quitting your art and maybe quitting art school in that moment, that was an option, that was a choice. And a lot of people give up on their dreams and they don't believe that they can do it. And she was really pointing out how many people actually gave up. And so I remember that so much. And it really served me well in the following years when it really got hard to stick with it and stay the course of my chosen path. And her question was, will you be one of those that gives up on your art? But quitting is an option. Many quit and some stay with it. And so that lesson stuck with me throughout the years of really defining my career path as an artist and knowing that I could just choose to quit. And most people do quit. And so quitting always feels easier. And that really stood out to me as something that I really was like, wow, if I really want this, I got to fight for it. So the other lesson that I learned was I really got this underlying foundation through all the lessons that it was really learning how to see how I see and learning how to express myself. So, my biggest takeaway to pass along to you is learn to express yourself and learn to see how you see. And it wasn't about watching over someone's shoulder or following a tutorial. In fact, we rarely did any kind of tutorial kind of things or watching, okay, do it exactly like this. Like that was just not my experience. I know there's probably a lot of art schools that are out there that are like that, but mine was definitely not like that. It was 4 years of learning different ways of learning how to express how I see. And one of the things, that stands out for me is we always had these exercises that prompt us to learn several ways to do this. So, there was lots of different lessons throughout the time, but one of them that stands out in my memory is one of those times where it really clicked for me was where we were given some materials to use with we were asked to create some monoprints using oils and we were given music to work with. And the other requirement was you had to pick your own source of inspiration. And it wasn't necessarily music that we already listened to. Mine was definitely like classical music that was something that I never listened to at that time. And so it wasn't like, here's how you use oils in making monoprints. It wasn't like, here's how it should look. It was literally just, here's the boundaries but we want to see how you find your inspiration and you express yourself. Like that was it. So that taught me right away because that was a foundation year. That was year one that it was around the idea of learning how to see and learning how to explore using these different mediums rather than formulaically following along someone's prescription. It was literally one of my favorite projects because it was so fun to find the source of inspiration, and my music was so dramatic and passionate. I picked the Yellowstone forest fires. I had this book because my family lived in that area, so I had this book of all these pictures from the forest fire, and I was listening to this music, and I was creating these monoprints of these forest fires. And of course, I'm sure technically they were like a disaster the way I was using oil, but it didn't matter because in the end, I had this expression of how I saw those forest fires based on my personal experience, based on music that really moved me, that felt like it aligned with that experience of those forest fires. And then in the end, she shot them and put them in slides and played the music, and we got to all witness what we had all created. It was really magical because it really pointed out, one, everyone has a different point of view. I can't even tell you how many different things that we saw and experienced with just that one project alone. And the other thing was that it didn't matter if you stuffed up the technical thing of how to use the oil. It wasn't about that at all. It was about the expression itself and you finding that source of inspiration. So that was where I really started going, "Oh, I do have a point of view. I do have a way of seeing things through my lens." So that taught me it was time to learn how to see how I see. So that was a really valuable lesson. The other lesson that I learned was that I can generate ideas that are worthy of pursuing. And I really, like I said in the earlier few minutes of this episode, I really didn't think that I had ideas in me that were worth pursuing. I really was worried that I was the one that, for some reason, there wasn't that ingredient in me and that I was a bit of a fraud as an artist, that I did not know how to really pursue ideas or even find the ideas or know what to do. And so I had this belief that there were no ideas in me, but I really came out with it that actually they're already in there and they are worthy of pursuing. So even though I thought that in the beginning when I started the art path and the art journey that everyone else was given these special abilities that I didn't have, and I really didn't consider myself an artist like them, but through art school and early on, like right in that first year, I really started discovering that you can generate ideas that are worthy of pursuing. And so that was a huge, powerful lesson. And it was a big idea and it's a big lesson. But to me, it's telling me that we all can generate ideas that are worthy of pursuing if we know how to source those ideas and direction that are really authentic to us. Another major lesson that I really found fascinating is that you don't need to watch anyone teach you skills. And what I mean by that is, I don't have a lot of memories of art school watching those teachers say, "Do it like this. Here's how you do this." They would literally say, "Here's some oils. We want you to do monoprints. Here's this." Occasionally, maybe if it was monoprinting or photography, there was a couple technical things, but it really was very minimal. It was more about taking the time and practice to give you the skills, meaning it was the practice, the exploration, and time that gave you the skills, not necessarily watching over someone and doing exactly like them. So, my lesson with this was that you just need a set of parameters to give yourself this concept to work with materials and paints and improve over time because your skills improve over time the more you work with those things. So that was really valuable because I probably thought that in art school I was going to be watching a lot of people and they were going to tell me exactly how to do it, but that's not the lesson that I got. Another key lesson, and I will be talking a lot about this on this podcast because I believe in this so much, and that lesson is trust yourself. I can't even tell you how big of a lesson this has been from those early stages. So I'm going to tell you a quick short story about something. For my fourth year thesis, because in the US, when we were doing a BFA, we have the fourth year. And in my school, we had a thesis project for that fourth year. And they said, you've got to pick a project. You're going to work on it for the whole year, and that's going to be your year end project. And so, because I had majored in design as a focal point, even though I had also kind of minored in photography just by nature of taking a ton of photography classes, when they said, here's your project to be a designer, the project scope didn't really interest me that much. And it was supposed to be around making, a corporate identity and, like, a whole logo treatment and all this stuff around designing logos, letterheads, business cards, all that stuff. And because I felt like, gosh, I'm gonna be doing that for a long time, I really don't wanna do that for my thesis project. That should have been a sign that I wasn't really meant to design those things for life, but I really wanted to buck the system. Typical me, I was like, "Nah, that's not me. I wanna do something else." I wanted to make an installation, and I wanted to use myself and my photography and all my things that I had learned through art school as that project. So, it was a really big risk because the topic was me expressing myself. I used photography skills and other skills that I had learned throughout, and it was an installation that I actually built. And I figured that I could always do those other, design jobs, those branding jobs down the road. It was a really big risk to tell the teachers that this is the kind of project I wanted to do because no one had ever done it before. And I had one teacher who completely supported me, and the other one, who was the lead of the department, was really upset and not that pleased because I had broken the standard protocol, which I find really interesting that art school, like, you're at an art school, it's about breaking the rules, right? So it felt like I should have the choice to break the rules, but it was definitely taking a big risk. And I'll tell you more about that project in a second, but in the end, I got an A on that project, and it wasn't because, it was such a great installation. I just believe that I put my heart and soul into it, and they loved it. And so it was my soul bared to all in my very first exhibition, the thesis show. And so that risk, that gamble that I took, it paid off. And it was definitely a challenge because it wasn't necessarily perceived as the normal thing to do. But that was another lesson that I had to learn to trust myself and listen to what I really wanted to do. And not everyone's going to believe you or get behind you when you make those decisions. But for me, it was that lesson of, yeah, that worked. And I got to remember to trust myself. Again, I learned that lesson over and over and over. I don't think it's a lesson that I've ever permanently learned, as in, like, I'm constantly relearning, like, yes, trust yourself, which brings me to my last lesson for now. And that is keep growing forever. Because one of the really profound things that happened when I took that risk in doing that thesis was that I personally, emotionally, I just wasn't prepared for what it meant to bare my soul so publicly. I mean, it was one of the most profound things still to this day that I've ever done, where it felt really vulnerable. It had text, it had images, it had a lot of stuff happening with that exhibition. And at that point, even though that's really what I wanted to do, I really couldn't turn up for the opening for more than 5 minutes. I was, like, running the other way, and I bolted, and I knew expressing myself was the path, but I just wasn't ready for it emotionally then to pursue it. And it was a very literal interpretation of me as well, and I think that was also a lesson in itself. But the lesson that I really came from that experience was keep growing, because what I knew I needed to do when I bolted the other way and I really didn't want to stand around and look at it with my friends or family, like, it was like, okay, we've looked at it, let's go. I knew I needed to overcome my insecurities and grow as a person. And I wasn't sure at that point if people liked what they saw, and I worried way too much about what they thought instead of being comfortable in my own skin. Now, today, if that same girl did that very same exhibition, I would be way more comfortable in my skin, even though I'd probably still feel very vulnerable, but not nearly as vulnerable as I did at that point in time. So, what I learned there was like, all right, keep learning, keep growing, keep moving forward because this is not the end of learning. So for me, the growth mindset really was instilled at that point and something that I've really embraced and find really fun, even though sometimes it feels really painful to learn some of the lessons. So I have many lessons to share with you on this podcast that have, a lot more angles to this art school story. But I just want to recap really quick on the key ones I really want you to take away for today. And again, whether you went to art school or not, just something I want you to remember because for me, they're really valuable lessons that I want to constantly remember. And that is one, quitting on your art is optional. Most people do. And that's really something that we can choose to do or not to do. And for me, I'm constantly reminding myself, like, yeah, quitting for me is optional. And in this case, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I've pushed too far past that point now. Number two, learn to express yourself and learn how to see how you see, not learning how to see how other people see, like copying over someone's shoulder, but learning how to see how you see. Number three, you can generate ideas that are worthy of pursuing just as anyone. I mean, no one is more special than you, but you have it in you and you can generate ideas that are worthy of pursuing. So remember that one forever. Number four, give yourself a set of parameters that you can work with that have materials and a concept, and then improve your skills through that, as opposed to feeling like you have to be perfect in your skills, but really just give yourself those parameters and materials, and your skills will improve over time. So that is the way to improve your skills. Number five, trust yourself and take risks. And there are so many lessons I have around trusting yourself and taking risks and what that has done for me and my art path and my art journey. That is something I always want you to remember. You've got to remember to trust yourself. And lastly, keep growing as a person and overcome insecurities. I truly believe the main thing that really holds us back is our insecurities and our self-doubt and all of that other stuff that kind of overshadows all the other stuff, because you can get better at all these other things. But if you're insecure and you're having so much self-doubt, it really can shadow everything and hold you back forever. So I hope you remember these lessons. I hope this was helpful. So if all of this sounds interesting to you, stay tuned for more episodes. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with others. It will help spread the word. And again, follow along the podcast for new updates. And you can also find a podcast version of this on YouTube at Michele Luminato Studio. So if you want to watch the podcast in video, find me over on YouTube. We have a lot to talk about on this podcast. My goal is to share my story and the story of others to empower you to make sellable art that feels like you too. And if you're curious about my paintings, you can find my artwork on Instagram at Michele Luminato. So if you're ready to finally let that art that is already inside of you come out to create highly desirable collections, tap that follow button in your favorite podcast app. And if you're excited about what is happening in these podcasts, if you could rate and review it on Apple Podcast, it would mean the world to me. I hope to see you on Instagram, also at originart_with_Michele. That's where I also do little clips of the podcast and dedicated to talking to artists. I will see you there.